नहीं टीचर वाले का पहले ही बोलते हैं मेरा नाम आगे पीछे करके फोकस कर दूंगा मैं
Welcome to our Honorable Chief Guest, Professor M. Asaduddin, Chairperson I-Class, Professor Swati Pal, Vice Chair I-Class, and the Chair for this session, Professor Subrata Paul Kumar, the valedictory speaker, Professor Nishi Pandey, convener of the seminar and Manager Secretary Managing Committee of our Girls Degree College, Professor Beena Rai, co-convener and principal, Professor Upma Chaturvedi, Vice Principal, Professor Fatima Rizvi, Organizing Secretary, members of the Managing Committee of the college, faculty members from the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow, and from various other colleges and universities, distinguished guests, dignitaries, delegates, participants from various parts of the country, respected faculty members of the college, and students. Let us commence the valedictory session with a floral welcome to the guests. I request Professor Upma Chaturvedi to welcome Professor Swati Pal, the chair of the valedictory session, with a bouquet.
हाँ. ये देखो स्टैंड रख दिया बीच में.
स्टैंड हटा दीजिए. स्टैंड पूरा हटाना होगा वाइल्ड लाइफ.
I request Professor Ranjana Krishna to present a bouquet to Professor Suprita Paul. I request Ms. Ansh Sharma to present a bouquet to Professor Nishi Pandey, convener of the seminar. I request Dr. Almi Raza to present a bouquet to Professor Beena Rai, co-convener. I request Dr. Devanshi Bhatnagar to present a bouquet to Professor Fatima Rizvi. I would request Dr. Devanshi Bhatnagar to present a bouquet to Professor M. Asaduddin. It is an honor and privilege to have amidst us Professor Swati Pal, the chair of the session. Professor Swati Pal, Principal, Janki Dev Memorial College, University of Delhi, has been a Charles Wallace and John McGrath Theatre Studies Scholar. Author of several books on theatre, creative in academic writing, her newspaper articles articulate her views on education. Her areas of research interest include performance studies and cultural history. She is a translator and poet. Her poems appear in several anthologies, as also a collection titled In Absentia, and an edited volume called Living On. She is the Vice Chair of the Indian Association for Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies. She is the recipient of several awards. I now request Professor Swati Pal to proceed with the session. I request all the dignitaries to please come up on the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I think I must begin with words of gratitude. A valedictory is a time for farewell, and I think we have fared well over the last 2 days. It's been absolutely wonderful to be here at our girls' college, And on behalf of I-Class, I would like to thank a whole host of people. Professor Fatima Rizvi, of course, Professor Nishi Pandey, Professor Beena Rai. I really don't know, but a whole host of students who have been here. Professor Minakshi Pahwa, Professor Upma Chakravarti. I don't know who all I should thank, but I think there are just too many people, and I hope I'm not leaving out anyone. Of course, the participants who presented papers, the various people who chaired sessions, and most of all, the young students, including the ones busy clicking pictures right now, who have left no stone unturned to make us all feel comfortable, who have been so attentive to our every need. Thank you very much for making this conference on Angarey and the progressive writers movement such a resounding success. It is rare that at the end of 2 days, one is a little tired, one has kind of flagging spirits, and one wants to wind up and probably go home. I must put it on personal record that this is the first time that I have no such feelings. I wish we could just carry on. It's been so wonderful. So my personal vote of thanks to everyone here. Now, it is my singular privilege and pleasure to introduce, though she requires no introduction, I'm not saying that as a formality. I think all of us know Professor Sukrita, but I have to follow the formalities, and so I will read out a short bio note. Sukrita Paul Kumar, poet and critic. I have known her since I was very young into academics, and I was in awe of her. I can say that to you on this stage, that I was always in awe of you. Poet and critic, was born and brought up in Kenya. She held the prestigious Aruna Asif Ali Chair at Delhi University. Formerly a fellow of the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla, she was an invited poet at the International Writing Program at Iowa, USA, and Hong Kong Baptist University, honorary faculty Darrell Center at Corfu, Greece, and she has been a recipient of many prestigious fellowships and residencies. Her recent collection of poems, amongst others, are Vanishing Words, Country Drive, Dreamcatcher, Untitled, and Poems Come Home, with Hindustani translations by Gulzar. She is the Writer in Context series co-editor, being published by Routledge, UK. Her co-edited book on the eminent writer Krishna Softi is the first in the series. Among her critical books are Narrating Partition and Conversations on Modernism. The translations include Nude, poems by Vishal Bhardwaj, and the novel Blind, HarperCollins by Joginder Paul. A guest editor of journals such as Indian Literature, Manoa Hawaii, and Muse India, she has held solo exhibitions of her paintings, so she wears many hats. Many of her poems come out of her experience of working with the homeless, street children, and tsunami victims. So we have, I think, nobody more appropriate than such a powerhouse as Sukrita ji to give us the valedictory address. Sukrita ji, all yours.
Thank you, dear Swati. Thank you, our girls' college. I am overwhelmed with the kind of hospitality that I have experienced here. And I don't know how to thank whom. I think we don't have to keep repeating the names. I thank everybody who's here, visible and invisible, in the sense that There are some obviously taking photographs, others who are just watching, photographs in the hearts. And it's been such a pleasure to have particularly participated in this particular conference. I think it has a lot to do also with the fact that these subjects which are very close to my heart. And I remember 30 years ago when I wanted to work on Urdu fiction and Hindi fiction and modernism and so on. And I'm talking about 30 years ago. And English department had refused me leave because they said, in English, you want to work on Urdu Hindi fiction? No, not allowed. And then ultimately I had to win a scholarship, fellowship, etc. And then they had no say in it because I'd already done my PhD, etc. So I very assertively showed off my fellowship and said, okay, bye, I'm going and I'm going to get my fellowship there. And sure enough, I think I did the wise thing at that time because though it was a little premature in terms of academic pursuits, but I know that I knew that this was what was going to become relevant eventually. And it took us quite a lot of time to realize that we needed to have Indian literature in translation in our courses. We had to struggle very hard in Delhi University for years. I remember when I came back from my fellowship, I had joined Professor Vinod Sena. We have to remember it because he was the one who had actually put seeds in our minds about how we need to fight and decolonize English departments. And decolonization meant a lot of things because even I can go on and on. I don't want to focus too much on that, but in a nutshell, we had to struggle very hard. I remember there were so many people who boycotted our seminars when we held a very huge seminar in Hindu College, Delhi University, on decolonizing the English department, because particularly Delhi University English department meant people who had come from Oxford and Manchester and so why would they want to be decolonized? Because they were carrying that baggage. And that baggage was, territorially important for them to carry on the project that the Englishman had started. It was very important. So it took them a lot of time. It took us a lot of time and struggle to actually thrust into the syllabus 10 years later, Indian literature in translation as a paper at the undergraduate level. And I remember, of course, it has a whole trajectory into therefore focusing on translation, that also. And I remember, and I would like to acknowledge very formally Katha's role in that. Geeta Dharmatajan. In 1985, she had set up a translation center, and Katha, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but Katha Prize Stories every year came out with at least 19 to 20 stories from different languages of India translated into English. So there was a lot of readership for it, but not academic following, right? But yes, the idea was to focus on translation. And then eventually and I'm giving you a little bit of a peep into it because I want you to understand the importance of the seminar that you have conducted out here, or the conference, the theme. Now, at that time then, focus on translation was there. I remember with Katha, I worked, for about 2 years consistently on the idea of having translation centers. Even now we don't have them, but we had constructed in our minds ideas on how there was a need for a translation center everywhere in all universities. We set up 5 translation centers in 5 different universities in India, the North, South, and different universities. And the idea was to give them a little bit of money to hold workshops on translation, particularly English department. And every university had many language departments. So why should there not be interaction between one language department and another language department and do translations? Whatever little happened, I think at least it produced a lot of passion for the idea of translation in some few individuals who are continuing to translate even today. And that is why we have the good fortune of reading literature from Kerala or Northeast or wherever, because all these translations are happening, but outside of the regular curriculum mostly, right? because we don't have formal translation centers in our universities. Anyway, coming to this particular conference, the next point that comes is how much of a context do we have? How much of a context do we have of, say, teaching, for instance, Rajendra Singh Bedi, right? So if we have Lajvanti prescribed in Delhi University, we have people who just go with that text and teach it as a story. But there's a huge story of number one, partition, number two, progressive writing, number three is an Urdu short story. So there's an Urdu tradition which you need to look at. How did Bedi write what he did? Or Krishan Chandra write what Premchand, what was he doing? Panchayat is prescribed there as a story in first year, I think, English honors. And even at that level, there were students, because they knew Hindi, they would come and say, but then isn't there a problem in translation? I used to love that. You know, they were actually comparing Hindi Urdu story with English, which was so lovely. So you're actually owning bilingualism also. Now, if we are doing Premchand, we are doing Rajendra Singh Bedi and all these writers and talking about progressivism, not talking about Angarey. Shame, absolute shame. So, Fatima, and thank you everyone here at Nishi for having organized this seminar, and so many of us, and I must tell you, it's not only got to do with the young minds and the young students, but even the mature, particularly oldies like me, who come from, you know, very British syllabi, you know. We would not have heard of Angarey. I was interested, was a separate matter. But many of us in the English departments, even today, didn't know about Angarey, you know. And so I would be very happy if the Facebook is full of Angarey. Thank you very much, Professor Asad, that you put in something today in the Facebook. Please inform everybody about it. Let people know what this means, you know. And that is the kind of discussion we need to have on social media, and not congratulations, congratulations, happy birthday, and all that all the time. So I think we need to change our mindset, particularly those of us who are in the business of teaching and learning and so on, and even general public. Coming back to the subject, why is it that I chose modernism? Do we have anything to do with modernism in this? I want to be a little futuristic. I want to move on from what we have been talking about till now. And that is why when Fatima insisted that I give a subject, very politely insisted that I need to have a title. Now, what do? You know, in 5 minutes, I had to give you a title. I said, okay, here you are, you know, and I ventured into giving that title, which is what? Modernism and progressivism, a symbiotic relation. And I think that spontaneity was not all that spontaneous, because behind that spontaneity, a lot of thinking and mind engagement of the mind has been there as to see how whether it is modernism or progressivism or any of these movements that one talks about in a linear fashion, there is an undercurrent of relatedness. There is a definite undercurrent of relatedness right from, I mean, right now for convenience sake, we are talking about progressivism, then we talk about modernism, then we talk, if we say then sequential, right? If there is a sequence, linear sequence, we talk about it. Then we talk about postmodernism, and now we've also started talking about postmodernism, right? But particularly we, when I say we, I'm talking about critical minds, critics, and academics. We love it to categorize, you know, cut, clip, categorize. Convenient. Have a talk on progressivism, have a talk on, but there is an ahistorical continuum. And we have to be very aware of this continuum. See, when we are doing modernism, especially when we are doing modernism, we are talking about that moment which is timeless. We talk about timelessness, we talk about all time, we talk about Joyce in that context, right? Ulysses and Joyce and so on. We talk about association of ideas. We talk about stream of consciousness, within which exists past and future and present, right? Past, which could be like a debris, but of course, if you develop a particular kind of an attitude or perspective is the word. If you have a certain perspective of what past is, without any prejudice, then you will realize that your understanding of the past has got a lot to do with your present experience. Because the past modifies itself with your understanding, totally. And similarly, within this present, there will be the potential of the future. And not just the potential, it is there, the possibility. So all time exists in this moment here and now, right? And I am saying this only as a kind of preamble to what I understand as the continuum in particularly creativity. Of course, progressivism had to happen at the time that it did. But can you say that modernism is not progressivism? And progressivism was not modern? Modern gets a little identified as modernism when it also becomes a structural, kind of an understanding as to how do you understand the modernist spirit or sensibility and so on. But if you go a little deeper, then the contexts would remain what they are for churning out modernist ideas or progressive ideas or postmodern ideas, but there would be a stable reality of understanding, which is a continuum. And I want to emphasize on this that there is, just as our cells in the body are constantly mutating, human consciousness is constantly mutating also in relation to the historical and technological and other elements that are all around. In relation to that, the manifestation of creativity takes place depending on what is the kind of defining that you do in your mind of your understanding of your history, etc., etc. Now, we have heard very relevantly, we've had a wonderful opening here in this conference where Professor Coppola very beautifully, talked about Angarey and the relevance and why Angarey had to happen at that time because there were Angarey in the hearts of the people who wrote those stories. And those sprinters and ambers had to find expression somewhere, right? And that expression was recorded with fire and anger, right? Which is not to say that it did not degenerate into banality. Which is not to say that it degenerated into sloganeering. Because the moment anything in itself becomes establishment, then those who are fighting, who are being anti-establishment, don't realize that they themselves are making another establishment. Right? And when that begins to happen, then obviously again there are Angareys. And those Angareys may not be called Angarey, but the modernists, had Angaras in their minds. And that is why then the new story started to happen, new poetry started to happen in almost every language. So that's the process of mutation that I want to talk about. The process is the same, manifestation will keep changing in accordance to the circumstance and context of that particular phenomenon, right? So I want to really focus on that because I think we have done very badly as critics when we have created these kulyas, molds, Yeah, kulyas is the right word, right? Kulyas? Yeah, you create a kulya and then everybody goes through, oh, I'm a progressive, which means a set kind of ideas, Where is the room for creativity then? That is why I feel that people like Krishna Chandra Bedi and even Faiz Ahmad Faiz and Banto, all these people who come at the cusp, they are the ones who have modernist ideas. And that is why they can play around with words, they can be innovative. They're very innovative because of the modernistic tendencies that they have. But the moment the modern becomes modernism, that becomes another Korea. Right? Another mold has been created, then postmodernism has to happen. So if you're factually, perceptively, if we begin to understand, it's very clear that if there is any linearity, it's only to see how the dynamism of tradition is taking place. And I love T.S. Eliot for saying that, and he has that in individual and the, individual talent, or tradition and the individual talent, right? He talks about dynamism of human spirit, which kind of digs into tradition and renews tradition in such a way that it seems to become something quite different from what it was. However, even to reject it, you have to make it a reference point. Only then you can reject it. If you don't, then where are you, right? You can't stay in a vacuum. You're never in a vacuum. If you are in a vacuum, then waiting for Godot happens. It happens, yeah, and which has its own, you have to understand that postmodernism, because there is no certainty there, right? No certitude there, no final solutions there. So you are waiting for Godot, and what you are waiting for, you have to define for yourself. Because there's no understanding of what Godot is anyway, right? So you get the Godot that you deserve, because you're constructing that Godot for yourself. So how expansive is your sensibility? It will all depend on. And so I would want to see Angarey as a metaphor. I would want to see it as a metaphor for that fire that grows within oneself, whether as a woman who's supposed to wanting to be a feminist in order to defy patriarchy in every possible way, or it is the laborer, who cannot take oppression anymore, or it is some kind of a truth which is not really the truth. And that happens all the time with the politicians, because they are constructing a facade of truth, which is actually lies, always. Most politicians are very good at that, dramatically good at that, right? So what do? They present that facade and they go on repeating it till you begin to say, yes, you are right. That's it. That is so the lie gets converted into truth. And that's the perception that the postmodernist uses. And also talks about how all truth is relative to how you perceive it, right? So there are multiple truths then. No absolute truth is there, which can be pulled down your throat to say, this is it. You'll have indigestion if you do that. If you don't perceive it, and if you swallow lies as truth, So the aim of literature throughout is, and these are the contradictions and paradoxes, throughout the aim is to try to work out what is truth. Simple. What is the truth of being? So what happened? What happened was the focus, when there wasn't any on the connection between the individual and society, when there wasn't any, there was a need to build up a bridge between the individual and the society. And therefore, issues of the other, of the society, became one's own issues in a way. And the creative articulation began to happen with the progressive movement, focusing on that. So social realism actually identified, while Shaw was talking about it in the West also, and we know French and Russians were also writers, were also doing it. And that is why in one of the most very important lectures, was it yesterday or day, whenever, there was this focus on, transnationalism in that one. While there was Angarey Gide on the one hand, and there was Gorky, all reacting to fascism, we're all reacting to fascism, the imperialistic tendencies, but in each culture, it worked out differently, but all in overall term, if you have is progressivism, through which all this was happening. But from that kind of focus, which was between, to build a relation or awareness of the relation between I and the collective, then comes, okay, individual. Where is the individual? That angst of the modernist. It comes up in a very with existential terminology. It begins to show up in itself. And of course, if I were to look at, and I have a whole book on that, which I thought I might read it because I've forgotten, it's about 30 years ago that I wrote this. And I found the first chapter abominable, never read that. But the second chapter onwards, I was very excited. I said, oh my God, I was thinking about these issues at that time, And now I realize that, now I need to build upon it. There is a need to look at it all over again. This work I did in 1990. So I'm going to redo this book, definitely. But what I'm trying to say is, it is in my second chapter that I start talking about the modernist temper, right? What was the temper that got into? And I'm talking about tradition and so on, which I think we need to think about. But anyway, I want to go back to that point about how the focus started to happen on the individual's interiority was being discovered. You see, once you get into the other, and then you want to go into the interiority, that entire domain where psychological oppression, that's also an oppression. A psychological oppression, a crisis of sorts, which partition also added, to that. So there are cultural reorientations happening, the angst was happening, dislocation was tremendously there, migrations were happening, people were not in control of their own, destinies, as it were, the kind of migrations that happened. So that's a whole domain. Partition and modernist temper are quite related, according to me, the destabilization that happened at that time. And I have done a whole chapter is one thing, but I did a whole book on that called Narrating Partition, in which I'm looking at Kitne Pakistan, Kamleshwar's Kitne Pakistan, Kurutullah and Heather's Aapka Darya. And I'm looking at many, many short stories which are to do with Lajvanti is also one of them, which is to do Jade, how you are perforce, is the chupta is Jade, the kahani. How women and on various planes, as a human being, and how sexual politics played a role also out there, the way women were being raped and so on. And without sometimes realizing that the woman, a Hindu man doing it to a Muslim woman, thinking it's a Muslim woman, but it might turn out that she's Hindu, I remember a story by Gulzar Sahab called Feared, Usme bhi kuch aise hai. Last minute, the person realizes, oh my God, this person who I was feeling so scared about, I was very fearful of this. And when he jumps out of the compartment, he says, Allah, He says, oh my God, this man was my own, belongs to my own religion, So all kinds of absurd things were happening. Absolutely, it was a question of perception, right? Now from that, and there's a whole lot of kahaniya and novels that are around that particular domain. But what happens from that point onwards is we move on to individual interiority to human consciousness and perception. That's when you come in a simplistic way, I'm reducing it in this small time, when you come to consciousness studies philosophically, and you have a whole lot of literature of that kind from the West, whether it's Kafka, Camus, Sartre, all of them are talking about it. And I hate it when people say, oh, but yes, that means that our literature was derivative of the West. That's not true. There is transnationalism even there. That is a 20th century phenomenon, more or less, for every movement. Right? That there is give and take that one. T.S. Eliot is talking about Shanti, 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 in the wasteland. So should we say that in any case it had gone from the east to the west and then it comes back from the west to the east? But this dialogue is very important globally. A global communication in terms of history of ideas. And now, of course, it's, I think, even interplanetary, maybe, because we are growing in terms of technology, we are interacting, with people sitting in Timbuktu and maybe somebody sitting in Barabanki. Is it? I heard that term yesterday, I mean, this kind of going across from one part to the other, because and again, another term, another word that we've been using is satellite. It's for the satellite to tell us how connected we are out here, right? Because if you take a long view, of the planet, you realize that we are so interconnected. And the distances that we talk about, thousands and thousands of miles between us, from the distance, it's a minuscule, right? And also internet and everything tells you, it tells you the whole story. So that global consciousness that we were talking about in the modernist period becomes different kind of global consciousness, the dialoguing that happens by the time we come to our contemporary times, right? However, the ultimate philosophic point is that we are connected and communications at the level of humanity are happening all the time. And particularly earlier, it was books that were being created and translations that were happening and passing from one continent to the other. So this intercommunication is what I want to talk about, think about as a very important thing. So when, in any case, every movement in the beginning starts off as something new, slowly degenerates into a rigidified, frozen frame, and then that has to be melted with Angarey. You just fire it a little, it melts and something else begins to happen. So this cyclic movement tells you that there is, just as genetically, in our families, we are kind of, don't we say, I have diabetes because not my father, but my grandmother had diabetes, right? So it's genetic, it's like that. So it grows into humanity, one of this mutational kind of thing that I'm talking about. So it was very interesting. I was looking at, Fatima, I was looking at the, what you circulated in terms of the abstract. And sorry, I could not attend most of the, sessions, but I actually counted and saw whether it is Hindi literature or Bengali or Gujarati, Assamese, Punjabi, Urdu, Malayalam, everybody within the country also was affected with progressivism and modernism. In my new venture that I'm doing now as writer in context series, I'm very involved in this series and looking at the modernities in plural. Just as you have progressive, the manifestation of progressive ideals in different ways, in different languages, in India itself also. We are talking about transnationalism. I think we should also think in terms of how different languages in India have their own individual temper also, linguistic tradition as well, in each one. And so overall progressivism, yes. But if you go deeper into it, you will begin to see the differences between one linguistic tradition and another linguistic tradition within the country. And we have a lot of masala, therefore, for comparative literature departments. Wake up, right? We need to do these comparative studies. And if we do that, then that vague idea about, unity in diversity, I hate that, But you begin to sense the understanding. And then if you go beyond it, you'll see even there the connections beyond borders. So the idea is to try to melt as many borders as possible, and yet be conscious of specificity and the roots. You cannot standardize it all by thinking it's all the same. No, it's not. There are differences. Feminisms, Dalit feminism is very different from the other feminism that you see, say, in other literatures, non-valid literatures, so-called standard literatures. So I think these are some of the points I wanted to, when I was looking at the abstracts, I noticed that, certain things we become kind of blind to. For instance, I never thought of Kedarnath Singh, for instance, as somebody who could be put into this slot, but there is a paper that was read on that. Of course, he was influenced, we all know, but how? And how is it very typical of the Hindi? And I feel very bad that the dialogue between Hindi and Urdu is also no longer there, which should be the case. Because with 1947, the division, the partition between languages also happened. Urdu started becoming more Persianized and Hindi started becoming more Sanskritized. So where was that dialogue? The tradition is so beautiful. What is called Ganga Jamuni kehte hain tehzeeb. It's not a myth, it was there. There were differences, of course there were differences, but they were learning from each other. The dialogue was there. Same is true of progressivism and modernism. The dialogue between the two is important. How can we say that Manto was not progressive or he was not a modernist? How can we say that? And he died saying that he doesn't want to belong to any category. But we are critics. We want him to fix into one. That is the tragedy as the academics and as critics. I think we as people who are following literature very passionately, I'm sure, we need to realize that we have to examine these texts for what they are with the throb that they have, of humanity and as human beings and interactions that you see. Sometimes the focus is on psychology and interiority, sometimes it's consciousness, sometimes therefore it becomes a theater of the absurd. Because it's neither here nor there. That absurdity is also something that we embrace. Because that's also part of us. It's the tragedy and the comedy of being a human being, right? So there are a lot of ideas which are not, I haven't really felt them out too much, but you can see that, some of these ideas which were over the turn of the 20th century, we saw Nietzsche, Marx, Freud, all these people coming in with new, breaking through the rigid ideas of what humanity is all about, or Marxism came up, etc. It was at that time people like Jamil Jalebi, it was at that time that he was actually actively translating these Western ideas so that there would be an interflow between East and West goes to East comes to West, and that ferment of ideas resulted in progressivism, which ultimately was reacted to by modernism, which was further reacted to by postmodernism. And just as in India, you have Belgadi and Jet at the same time. Similarly, you have modernism, postmodernism simultaneously with progressivism. Who would say that progressivism is not valid today? Who would say that it's outdated and we don't want to think about it? What we don't want to think about is having to go to slogans and propaganda. That happened, and therefore it had to be thrown out of the window. And something new had to happen. And if something new were to happen, new forms have to also happen. New styles also have to happen. Because it's not the content, it is the form that makes the content and the content that makes the form. So that is what modernism taught us. That is what Virginia Woolf taught us. And I think I would want to end at that. Thank you very much.
वो नहीं मूव करते ना, यहाँ से टूटा हुआ है.
I hope the mic doesn't start echoing. The moment I come near the mic, it starts echoing. It frightens me. So after that very riveting valedictory address, which I could see that the audience was absolutely mesmerized, I feel that I'm short of words. But one of the things about being a principal is that you kind of mastered the art of speaking at all times. I'm sure, Abhina Rai, you agree with me. So I want to tell you what I have learned, the few things that I have learned when you were speaking, Suprita ji. So I'll put forward my thoughts from whatever I'm carrying back from your valedictory address, which I've kind of penned down right now. So one of the things that that you spoke about was about tradition. And I was thinking about somebody like Picasso and the fact that, yes, Picasso, father of modern art and so on. But if you look at Picasso's early life, you will find that he did completely traditional painting. So the fact is that whenever we are talking about something that is either progressive or modern, we can't really ever escape tradition. We can manipulate it, we can use it in a different way. It's something that evolves, it's dynamic. And that's what we've got to understand about art. My students sometimes say, okay, ma'am, so this era ended and the next era started. It's something that they ask me about Ibsen, for example. They always say, so Ibsen, is he a realist or is he a naturalist? And as you said, Subrata ji, that there is this tendency in us that we want to box up people, we want to put them neatly into boxes. And I've got to tell them he's both, he's a realist, he's a naturalist, and he also probably is a symbolist. Because if you come to a play like Wild Duck, you would probably find a lot of symbolism there. Why? Because history is like that, because time is like that. And that is what, that's the first thing I carried from your talk, which is that, we keep trying to create these categories, but we can't really escape either tradition or modernity for that matter, because time evolves like that, and so does literature. The other thing that I carried back from your talk is something that came up in one of the sessions in the session that I chaired. And we spoke about angst in that session too. And we spoke about the fact that existential questions keep arising at certain points of time in history. And they arise because of fear and instability. I spoke about it at that particular session, and I spoke about the fact, and you touched upon it too, because you spoke about Freud and you spoke about Marx and and all of these intellectual thinkers, and all of them were writing at a time when the world had just witnessed something that it never thought it would witness, which is World War, and a war that got repeated. So if you have Estragon and what is the other guy? Yeah. So if they're kind of waiting, one is wondering, what are they waiting for? Another world war? So this whole thing about when the entire world disintegrates, what is it that, what are the thoughts that would arise in you? What are the existential questions that you would address in this moment of complete instability? So that's something that I'm carrying from your talk. The other thing that I'm carrying from your talk is the whole idea of what really is progressive. And I want to share two short anecdotes. One is when I was a little girl, and I have three elder sisters who are more like surrogate mothers. Anybody who's the youngest child, my sympathies with you. So I was actually told, Aapko Godfather nahi padhna hai because it's got a lot of sex in it. Aapko Lady Chatterley's Lover nahi padhna hai because it's got a lot of sex in it. So sex was the bad word. You tell a class 7 child not to read a book because it's got sex in it, that's the only reason why she'll want to read it. So I first read Godfather, and I must admit that I had my ears burning when I read it. And then I read Lady Chatterley's Lover, and I was shattered. There was nothing sexual about it that I found. I found it the most disappointing book in terms of, the sex bit of it, because I'd read Godfather, of course. So the whole idea about what is modernity really changes from your position and your situation and your context. I have students who keep getting angry whenever I've taught British drama. and I teach, Look Back at Anger by John Osborne. And they ask me, but ma'am, why is Alison so irritating? वो जवाब क्यों नहीं देती है Jimmy को? Why does she allow Jimmy to dictate to her like that? And you've got to take them back to that time and to that situation. So what is very modern at one point of time may not be at another point of time. To a 21st century woman, maybe it may be irritating or frustrating. So we've really got to transport ourselves back in time, in history. One very important thing that I carried back from your talk, and I am witness to it because Sukrita ji, you may not remember, but in one of the instances at IIC, when you'd spoken about translation, I was there. And Sukrita ji was really trying hard to say, ki sabko translation center karna hai. We were already converted anyway. But she was really, so she's really been at the forefront of translation studies. And you spoke about many. I would acknowledge a debt of gratitude to you for your work in this sphere. And again, I want to say, how can we ignore translation? So many things that we study, we don't even realize that they're translated. Sir, how could we have studied Ibsen अगर वो translated नहीं होते तो? पर हम उसको इग्नोर कर देते हैं बिकॉज हमारे सिलेबस में वो हमेशा से था और किसी ने बताया नहीं. Nobody told us that you are reading a work in translation. When I teach students of my college, there are students who studied English up to class 8. For 4 years, they study no English. They don't come from a family which speaks in English. So when they come to my college, I translate. So you using translation all the time, and we are all translated people anyway. I mean, there's nothing about us that isn't translated. There's nothing about all of you which isn't translated. You could be wearing a sari from Bengal. You could be sporting a juda, which has a juda clip from Gujarat, and so on. So we are all translated in that sense. Can we really typify ourselves? I warned you, you never get a principal to chair a session. Okay, and last couple of other things, which is that, yes, and again, I said this at the session that I was chairing, that, one of the things that we need to look at, including that we need to look at about Angarey, is how does Angarey function as a text? Is it only propaganda? Because in my opinion, anything that is only propaganda will exist only as propaganda. It will die. It will not live across time. So if it lives across time, it is also good literature, which is what Sukrita ji told us. Sukrita ji, you told us about the fact that, it irritated you, the unity in diversity bit, and the fact, and I get your point. What you're trying to say is that we have to make a space for difference, the fact that we are all different from each other. And I was thinking while you were talking about depictions of Sita and of Draupadi, and I was thinking about how we are not even aware, many of us, that there are so many different versions of the Ramayana. For example, there is this Sri Ramayana, which I wonder how many people even know about it. Or the fact that there is the Draupadi tale, and there is this wonderful play by Kiran Nagarkar called Bedtime Story. And I recommend it to all young people and to all old people like me. Please read it if you haven't read it. It is really such a fascinating look at the Mahabharata story because it's a complete subversion. It's a complete reversal. And it is also the voice of Draupadi. So, that's about it. I think I've said enough, but I think from whatever I've said, Sukrita ji, this is my tribute to you, that I have learned so much, and I'm sure the audience has learned so much more. Thank you so much.
I request Professor Ranjana Krishna to present a brief report of the seminar.
Good evening. It is indeed a matter of great pride for us to host this prestigious I-class international seminar on a topic so close to our heart, Angarey and the Progressive Writers Movement. The aim of the seminar is to revisit the movement which started in the city and continues in spirit even today in the liberal minds and heart of the people of the city. The two-day international seminar started with the inaugural session. Professor Nishi Pandey, convener of the seminar, welcomed the guests. Professor Asaduddin, in his address, discussed the landmark that Angarey made in the literary circles and how it revolutionized the society. Professor Carlo Coppola delivered the keynote address virtually. He is Professor Emeritus of Hindi Urdu at Oakland University, Michigan. The plenary address was delivered by Dr. Talat Ahmed, Senior Lecturer in the South Asian History Department at the University of Edinburgh. In the evening, a special session was organized. Professor Salim Arif, Head Department of Cultural Studies, Whistling Words International, Mumbai, and visiting professor at National School of Drama, New Delhi, spoke on the spirit of progressivism in various art forms. This was followed by a cultural program put up by the students of the college, which included Ganesh Vandana, performed by Rhythm Sarkar, a special child, and a dance performance on Thumri. The students narrated snippets from the representative stories taken from Angarey, followed by a self-composed story by Dr. Almi Raza. In the valedictory session, we have amidst us Professor Sukrita Paul Kumar, a celebrated poet, painter, and critic. She needs no introduction in literary circles. Ma'am enlightened us on progressivism and modernism, a symbiotic relation, by her very illuminating and riveting talk. The seminar had 15 business sessions spread over the 2 days, which included sessions on gender identity and politics, Angarey and activism, writers under trial, poetry, dissent and confession, Rashid Jahan Angarewali, Choktai, Bedi, and the progressive short story, Angarey, poetry and progressivism, pan-India progressivism, progressive poetry, art, love and activism, progressive poetry, fiction and drama, looking beyond progressivism, the progressive Indian English novel, the progressive Indian novel, dissenting women, and cinema and the progressive writers. I'm delighted to share that the seminar received a huge response and over 100 scholars participated, including several international scholars. The seminar provided an academic platform for deliberations and discussions on themes that impacted literature in most of the Indian languages, besides other art forms. And I can safely say on everybody's behalf that we have been immensely benefited from this academic endeavor. As Professor Kumar said, let's construct our own Godot. To sum up, I'll quote Faiz Ahmad Faiz, बोल की लब आजाद है तेरे, बोल ज़बां अब तक तेरी है, बोल ये थोड़ा वक्त बहुत है, जिस्म और ज़बां की मौत से पहले, बोल कि सच जिंदा है अब तक, बोल जो कुछ कहना है कह ले। शुक्रिया।
Now I request Professor Fatima Rizvi to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Reza, and good afternoon. It is my honor and privilege to promote the formal vote of thanks for this two-day seminar on Angarey and the Progressive Writers Movement, hosted by Awadh Girls Degree College, Lucknow, in collaboration with the Indian Association of Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies, the ICLAS. I would like to begin by thanking our keynote speaker, Professor Carlo Coppola, for his address, A Personal Journey in Finding Angarey. I would like to thank our plenary speaker, Dr. Talat Ahmed, for her address covering the IPA manifesto. And I would like to thank Professor Sukrita Paul Kumar for her valedictory address, blending the literary and the political aspects of the movement. I must share that all our speakers very enthusiastically agreed to make their addresses when I first got in touch with them. And I am really, truly beholden to them for this. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude in absentia to the patron of Awadh Girls Degree College, patron of the seminar, and the president of Awadh Girls Degree College, Ms. Zareen Bikaji, for her keen enthusiasm and support. To the principal, Dr. Beena Rai, and co-convener of this seminar, for her enthusiasm in supporting us wholeheartedly in all our endeavors. I must extend my warmest gratitude to Professor Nishi Pandey, the convener and manager secretary of Awadh Girls Degree College, for her astute and unstinted leadership and ever readiness to deal with anything at hand. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Professor M. Asaduddin, chairperson of the ICLAS, for readily agreeing to support the seminar and for being always just a call away, for his guidance and for his support. Thank you. I would like to thank the members of the ICLAS board, all of you who have traveled to Lucknow to be with us physically, and those of you who have lent support but have not been able to travel here to be with us. Thank you once again. I must thank wholeheartedly Professor Ranjana Krishna for her immense hard work in ensuring the smooth running of the seminar, and the entire faculty at the Department of English, Awadh Girls Degree College, for their unstinted support. Ms. Ansh Sharma for shouldering so much. Where are you, Ansh? Thank you very much. She never failed to respond that no matter what time of the day her assistance was required. Dr. Devanshi Bhatnagar, I think they're all backstage. Dr. Devanshi Bhatnagar and Dr. Almi Raza, who worked tirelessly to conduct the seminar smoothly. And also put together, thank you, and also put together the cultural evening. All three of them, under the guidance of Professor Krishna, have ensured such a perfectly smooth running of the conference. Thank you very much. I must thank also all the faculty and all the office staff at Awadh Girls Degree College for their ready support and their enthusiasm. Thank you very much, all of you. I think all of you are not here, but it's my thanks goes out to all of you, each and every one of you. I would like to thank very much Dr. Neetu Agarwal for supporting the seminar with her technical expertise, for ensuring the smooth running of all the online business sessions, and particularly the two important international ones. My gratitude goes out to Dr. Salim Arif for his erudite address, for creating new areas of thinking for the young minds over here. Thank you. I extend my warmest gratitude to all the young girls who performed at the cultural evening. Your hard work in putting together the performances and the readings is much appreciated. It gives me much pleasure also to wholeheartedly thank all my student volunteers. At Awadh Girls Degree College, Lucknow, and from the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow. Our rapporteurs, technical assistants, and all of you have enthusiastically ensured the smooth running of each and every session. I really cannot name all of you over here, but I must say that we can do nothing without you. And I honestly believe that you will go far. I wish you much, much success, each and every one of you. I would like to thank also all the delegates, those of you who have presented online, who have traveled to Lucknow, as well as those of you who belong to Lucknow, for presenting your papers. Truly, the seminar would not have been possible without you. I must thank also all the students at our Girls Degree College for joining in the sessions and being keen listeners to all the papers that were presented. Thank you very much. My gratitude goes out to the members of the press, both print and electronic, for covering the seminar so smoothly and so efficiently. And last but not the least, I extend my warmest appreciation to the CAN team and all the support and technical staff at AGDC, without whom we would never have achieved an event of this scale. Once again, I really hope I haven't left out anyone, and I'm extremely sorry if I have. Once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for making this seminar a reality. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Deep felt gratitude and warmest thanks to Fatima. It was her baby. She gave the idea. She brought it here. She worked on it. We were just there to support. So let me say thank you, thank you, thank you.
With this, we come to the end of this two-day international seminar. Before proceeding for the team, I wish to inform the participants that they may collect their certificates